Hello, this is part one of a new video on the Godot Game Engine. This is going to be a complete end-to-end game project. I have no idea how many parts it's going to take yet. We're going to be building it as we go. I've given it the super creative name Space Rocks because I was such a big fan of Asteroids when I was a kid. Love that game, so we're going to make a updated version of that in the Godot Game Engine. Now, if you're new to Godot or you're new to game development and coding in general, this might not be the best place for you to start because while I'm going to be explaining some of the things I'm doing as far as they relate to the Godot engine, I'm not necessarily going to explain every little thing. So if you want to, I have a Godot 101 beginner series. That might be a good place for you to start. And then once you've got a little experience under your belt, you can come back to this video and continue on from there. All right, before we start making anything, let's talk about the art we're going to use. I've chosen this package from Open Game Art. It's by an artist named Kenny, and it's a space shooter pack that has all sorts of useful images in it for meteors and spaceships and lasers and all sorts of fun stuff like that that we'll be able to use. So if you go to Open Game Art, you can download that from there. And when you do, it's going to come with a bunch of folders, an individual folder that's got all the files in it, but it also has a sprite sheet. And if you look here, the sprite sheet looks like this. It's got all of the graphics packed in there very tightly in one big image. And it also comes along with an XML file that describes where those images are in this sprite sheet, or atlas, which is another word for that. So if you want this gray meteor, it'll tell you the coordinates and the width and height of that image. And to make it easy to read all these graphics in, we're going to install a plugin. So if you go to the asset library right here, I'm going to type in Atlas and hit search. And there is the Atlas importer. All right, and if you click on that, you can see this is designed to import. Atlas is made with Texture Packer, a program named Attila, which I've never used before, but it also knows how to read the Kenny Assets XML, which is going to make it really convenient for us. So you click on Install, which really should be called download because it downloads the package here. And then when you click install, it's going to ask you where to put it. So it's going to create an add-ons folder, and that's fine. I'm going to uncheck license and the README. I don't need those in my resource root folder. And I'm going to hit install. Package installed successfully. Okay. Now to use this or any other add-on that you install, you also have to go to the project settings and you have to enable it here. So there's the Atlas importer. It's set to inactive, so we're going to set it to active. Hit close, and now if we click on the import menu, we have a new option here. 2D Atlas. Yes, it's misspelled. We send in a pull request to him. Import a 2D Atlas from other tools. You go here and you can choose Kenny sprite sheet from the options. Okay, we need to choose where the meta file is, which is the XML. We're going to click on here. We're going to browse to the folder where we downloaded the art pack, and in the sprite sheet folder is the sheet.xml. I'm going to open that, and there in the preview we can see all of the individual sprite images ready to go. Very nice. They have these are the names that were assigned to them in the XML file that Kenny provided. Now we just need to pick the target texture file. And I'm going to click on there and I'm going to hit create folder. So I'm going to make an art folder just to put all of my stuff in. We'll keep it named sheet.tex. This is a texture file that Godot recognizes, and we hit save. And so now we have all of our settings the way we want them, and we're going to hit import. Okay, now if we look in the art folder, now you're going to see all of the textures in here. And you see they're all ATEX files, ATEX. What that means is they are really just references. What Godot is doing is it's keeping them all in the large texture file, but these are all individual references to where they are in the full sheet. See, there's the sheet texture. So all the data is in there. These are individual files that point into the pieces of this that we're going to cut out so that we can just grab them and use them. All right, so let's start making our player spaceship. That's going to be the first thing we're going to work on in the game. All right, there's a lot of ways we could set up our player's scene. What I'm going to do is for its root node, I'm going to choose an area 2D. Okay, an area 2D will let us do the collision detection so we can tell when anything enters it, so we can tell if a meteor runs into it, a bullet hits it, or if you go over a power-up. We don't need any of the fancier physics because we're not going to have the player bounce off of things or push things. I just want to tell when something has run into it. So we're going to grab that. That's going to be our player. So I'm going to name that player. Let's save this. So we're also going to make a scenes folder. We're going to keep all of our scenes in there. Just starting to get a little organized here. Let's grab this and put this in the middle for the moment. And now under this, to this area 3D, let's add a sprite. Okay, and the texture we're going to use is one of these spaceships. Where are all the spaceships? Here we go. This is the one I like, so I'm going to grab this one, I'm going to drop it on the texture, and there is my player's ship. All right, let's zoom in on this so we can see it a little better. And we're going to name this ship. I like to give names to all of my nodes, not leave them the default names. And now to this area 2D, we need to add a collision shape 2D. And the shape we're going to make that is a circle shape. Let's call this the collision. And now make sure that when you're using a collision shape, you never grab these handles and resize it. That will be a problem. We're going to grab this handle on the inside here to change its extents. And we're going to just make this fit over the spaceship. Okay, and we can tweak this a little bit later as we get there. I think maybe I want it a little bit lower. So I'm going to take the Y and maybe add a little bit, maybe 8, yeah, let's call it 5. Okay. So there we go. So now our collision shape is nice and centered. Now the problem, what will happen is you're going along, you're doing things, and you grab this and you move it, and oh, I didn't want that, right? So what I usually like to do is on the root node of your object, click this button right here. What this button does is make sure children are not selectable. So when you click that, it doesn't matter what node you have selected over here. Whatever you grab, you're going to grab the root node, and only that will move. And since everything is attached to it, everything stays connected. Okay. All right, let's hit play and just see what this looks like. So there's what we're going to have with our ship. Now, the size here is a little bit big. I don't want it taking up this much of the screen. I want to feel like I have more room to fly around. So I'm going to go to the ship here, and I think I'm going to shrink this down a little to 60% of the size, which of course is going to mean my collision shape is going to need to be a little bit smaller, like that. All right, well there we go for that. Now let's add a script to this so we can start flying it around. So we're going to add script. This is fine. The path, I don't want it in the scenes folder. I'm going to go here and I'm going to make a scripts folder. Player.gd is fine, goes with the player scene. It's going to inherit area 2D and create. All right, so our controls for the ship are going to be left and right, or A and D for rotation, and then we're going to use up arrow and W to thrust. So we need to set a couple of variables. I'm going to make these exportable so we can edit them in the inspector. So the rotation speed is going to be how fast the ship spins. And we can do this in degrees or we can do this in radians. I tend to prefer doing things in radians. So I'm going to call this about 2.6, so not quite 180 degrees. And then our thrust, that's how strong the thrust of the engines is going to be. We're going to set that to, let's try 500 and see how that goes. And then we're going to have a max. Let's export this. A max velocity, that's going to be the maximum speed that the ship will travel, so we don't go flying off. And I'm also going to add some friction. Yes, in space there's no friction, but this isn't a realistic game. This is an arcade style game, so I do want the ship to coast to a stop if we let go of the thrust button. Okay, now these are export vars, so that over here we'll be able to adjust them however we want as we're tweaking this and making it work right. Okay, I'm going to do screen wrapping. So when we hit the edges of the screen, we're going to wrap around to the other side. So we're going to need to know the screen size. We're going to have a variable to track our position, and we're going to have a variable to track our velocity. And both of these, and our acceleration, right, are three values we need for the normal equations of motion. And we're also going to track the rotation. Okay, now these are all variables that we're going to adjust as we move around. And what some people like to do is just to indicate that these are going to be, what type these are going to be. We just set these to vector 2s. This is also going to be a vector 2. Just so you get an idea of what those will be when you set them later. And in the ready, we're going to start filling these in. So first of all, the screen size. The screen size we can get at runtime by using the get viewport size. Sorry, get viewport rect dot size. And then the position that I want my ship to start at is going to just be screen size over 2. And then we're going to set the position of the ship to that position. Okay, so that should make us pop up at the center of the screen when we start. And there we go. We're centered at the center of the screen where we want to start. All right, now I've gone ahead and in the project settings, I've added to the input map the keys we want to use. For left and right, I'm using WASD and the arrow keys, left, right, and thrust. And then I also added in here shoot. We're going to use space or the left mouse button. We'll see how we like that when we get to the point where we're ready to start shooting. So let's make this ship move. So we need to use a set process to true, and we're going to do the process function. And so in this one, we're just going to check the inputs. Okay, so first we're going to see you need to do rotate left and rotate right. So is action pressed? We're going to look for player left. And if they press player left, then we're going to take our rotation and we're going to add our rot speed times delta. And then we need to do the same thing here for is action pressed player right. Player right, we're going to just subtract. So we've increased our rotation variable, we've incremented it, and now we just need to update the rotation. So we need to set the rotation to whatever rotation we did. And by the way, all the angles are done in radians. If you really want to do degrees, there is a rot_d function that does do degrees. It's up to you. You are just sometimes going to have to convert from degrees to radians and back and forth to get everything to talk the same thing. For example, vectors. Vectors do everything in radians. You can't choose degrees, so you're going to have to change it somewhere. But that's good enough for now. Let's check it out and make sure it works. Play the scene, and I'm turning to the right, I'm turning to the left. WASD are both working. Sorry, A and D, left and right. Perfect. Okay, now for the thrust, we're going to duplicate this one more time, and we're going to use the thrust input. And what we want to change here is we want to change the acceleration. Okay, the acceleration is just going to be a vector 2, and we're going to have it be our thrust variable, and we're going to rotate that to whatever direction we're pointing in, right, which is our rotation variable. Okay, so that's what the acceleration is if we have the arrow key down. Otherwise, our acceleration is going to be 0. So our acceleration, we're going to make that to vector 2, 0, 0. So we have thrust when we press it, no thrust when we don't. And now we're also going to, so we're going to take our velocity, and that's just going to be acceleration times delta. Whatever our current velocity is, we'll have that acceleration added to it. And whatever our position is just going to be the velocity times delta. So now if we set pause to whatever position is, let's see what we see. Oh, look at that. I am going sideways, right? And the reason for that is that our ship started out pointing upwards because that's the orientation that the image was in. But a 0 rotation is pointing to the right. So we need to account for that and shift our rotation by 90 degrees, or pi over 2. And that's going to have it now pointing the right way. So now our thrust is out of the back of the ship, and we go in whatever direction we're pointing. So now let's just add in that friction so that we don't go to, or we will coast to a stop when we let go. And then we'll also add cap the velocity at the maximum velocity. So what we need to do here is, when we've gotten our acceleration from our thrust, we're going to adjust it by adding negative friction, right? It goes in the opposite, friction points in the opposite direction, and it scales by velocity. The faster you're going, the stronger the friction force is, okay? And that's going to make it coast to a stop. So I've let go of the key, I'm coasting to a stop, and that's pretty good. All right, I know we're running long, but I want to do one more thing, which is keep us from going around or going off the screen and make us wrap around the sides. So we're going to just check if our position X is greater than the screen size width, then we're going to set our position X to 0. Okay, so we go off the right, we go back in on the other side. And then I'm just going to duplicate that for the other ones. Okay, so there I've just duplicated these real quick. And so what that's going to do is let us zoom along and wrap around the screen. All right, and that'll do it for this time around. In the next video, we will add some weapons to our ship and make the shooting work. And then it'll be time to start talking about the pesky asteroids that we've got to hunt down and destroy. But thanks for watching, and I hope you will like the video and subscribe so you can see the next installment, and I'll see you next time.